Hello and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that asks, how did World War I pilots get to the airfield? By plane. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at An Attrition of Souls from Compass Games.
Ich grolle nicht, und wenn das Herz auch bricht, ewig verlorenes Lieb, ewig verlorenes Lieb, ich grolle nicht, ich strahlst in Diamantenpracht, es fällt kein Strahl in deines Herzens Nacht, das weiß ich längst.
In An Attrition of Souls from Compass Games, two players take on the roles of the various belligerents in World War I. You're going to have, of course, the Central Powers versus the Allied Powers. The game board consists of a map of Europe with various spaces connected by lines. These are the paths of advance that various armies can take on their routes toward victory. You're also going to have the capitals, which are squares. You're going to have Berlin, London, St. Petersburg, etc. And this is where you're going to mobilize new units on the game board. These are also your entry points. The British also have a few entry points in the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean, in Alexandria, and in Greece once it becomes a belligerent. Players are going to go ahead and collect all of their national armies that start the game in 1914. They're going to go ahead and they're going to place all of their armies into their respective bags, and they're going to go ahead and prepare to play the game. Now, on the game board, you're going to go ahead and put out the various counters for neutrals that will eventually come into the game as the game progresses. These neutrals include Romania and Bulgaria. They include Italy and the United States and other nations as well. Now, the Central Powers go first, followed by the Allied Powers. But every round you have a sequence of events. The very first thing you do is you check to see if you have 17 industrial points. If you have 17 industrial points at the beginning of a turn, then you have won the game. And the turn track always goes spring and fall of a particular year. And when you get to a certain part of the year in which a belligerent is neutral is becoming a belligerent, you place all of their counters into your stack. Now, they haven't entered the war yet, but they are preparing to. If in a preceding turn you had had some of your units destroyed, you can choose to return some, all, or none of those destroyed units back into your bag. If you've just lost units you don't really care about, you may not want to put them back in at that time. You look at your industrial production track, and that's going to tell you how many units you can build that turn. Essentially, how many units you can draw from the bag. You draw that number of bag and you put them into your reserves. Now, you may also draw some of those neutrals that just came out. You place those in the reserves right alongside of your regular troops. Now, critically, the Russian player, that is to say the Entente player, the Allied player, they can choose to have Russia surrender at this point if they want to. Now, if the Germans are advancing and it looks like they may take some of those cities and some of those production point boons, it may be advantageous for the Entente to go ahead and surrender Russia. That way Germany cannot get those points, but then, of course, they're forced to face the full wrath of the Central Powers on their front. You can also rail any units you have on the board back to your capital, back to your reserve box rather, from anywhere they are on the board, provided you've got a clear path line from where they are back to your capital. Any of the chits that you drew, except neutrals that you just drew, you can go ahead and put those out on the game board. You can put them in your capital. So, of course, the Germans are going to mobilize in Berlin, the Austrians in Vienna, the British can mobilize in London or in Alexandria, the French can mobilize in Paris, etc., etc., etc. Now, you can go ahead at this time and move your units. You can move them all the way through uncontested areas to as soon as they arrive in a place that where they are contested or they don't have control over, they go ahead and they must stop. Once they've stopped, you go ahead and you put a contested marker in there if there is enemy units. If not, then they can go ahead and they can claim that for themselves. Only the Entente may use the naval lines. These are blue naval lines. The Central Powers may never use those naval lines to attack across the seas. Now, in any space where you have both Entente and Central Powers units that is contested, you flip the contested marker to battle. There's going to be a battle there. So you're going to have various battles across the board depending on how a player moved their units. Next, you're going to conduct battle. Now, battle in this game is very simple. Each unit that you have has a dice symbol on it, and that dice symbol is going to show the number of pips that they take a hit on. You're going to go ahead and put out both of your armies and your enemy armies, and the attacker will then roll a number of die for the largest single national army he has. So for instance, if you're the Germans and you have 5 German units and 3 Austrian units, you don't get to roll 8, you would just roll the 5 for the Germans. You roll those die, and then you compare the die to all of your units that have that number of pips. So if you rolled 3 1s, but you only have 2 infantry that are score 1s, you would just score 2 hits. If you have 2 infantry and you just roll 1 1, then you only get, of course, 1 hit. Typically, your infantry scores on a 1, your artillery scores at a 2, and your airplanes score on a 3. Now, as soon as you've calculated your hits, you do the same thing to your units. Essentially, you compare the pips on your the die you just rolled to your enemy's pips, and that's how they're going to score hits. The enemy player, the defending player, does not roll die. All the die is triggered off the die. All the hits, rather, are triggered off the die that the attacker rolled. Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to start removing your units. You're going to decide which units you want to remove. They go to your destroyed box. If you have successfully destroyed all the enemy in that region, then you claim that region. If, however, the battle's inconclusive, there's still units from both sides there, you flip the battle marker back to the contested side. If you drew any of those neutral nations that are still in your reserve box, at this point you can place them in their capitals and they are now a belligerent. They are now part of the war, and beginning on the next turn you'll be able to use them just like any other army you control. If you have any units in your reserve box that you didn't choose to use except the neutrals, they go to your destroyed box. So players go back and forth. They are producing units based on their IP. They're putting neutral markers in the bag. They are advancing. They're fighting battles, and they're hoping to conquer more IP to get to that 17 IP. As soon as one power block has 17 industrial production, then they win an Attrition of Souls. Okay, so that's just the basic game. There's more going on here. For instance, there are a lot of optional rules. You can play with cards. Essentially, you can play a card, 1 card a year, or it's got timing on it. Usually play at the beginning, or you can play it with the timing, which can affect the game at certain points. You've also got some units that you can use. The Axis or the Central Powers rather have some special heavy infantry. The Allies have tanks, and these things will roll sometimes on 2 different die. They'll activate on 2 different die rolls. So there's lots of different units you can bring in here. You also got leaders that help you manipulate die rolls. There's a lot of different optional rules you can play with this game, and I played with some of them. I played this game a few times, and I played with some of those rules. And of course, they don't fundamentally change the game, but they do add a little spice and sugar to the game. But this is a pretty straightforward game. It's a pretty simple game, and it plays in about 90 minutes, give or take. It's not a long game, and yet it still has this strategic scope to it. It's really interesting, this combat system, and it really does simulate kind of attrition warfare. Just one side rolls the die, and then the hits trigger on both sides off of that die roll. Very interesting and very fun. It's a very fun way to have combat in a game. It's also fun, too, bringing in the neutrals and deciding when, you pull their chits. Do you really want to bring them in yet? Maybe you just drew one of them and you don't feel like they're strong enough to bring in, so you're going to hold off and wait till maybe you can draw more. Or maybe it's just not advantageous at that time to bring that neutral in, so you can just kind of leave them in there in your reserves. And so that's the whole neutral dynamic, and how they come in and when they come in, and how you can manipulate that is pretty fun as well, too. But this is just an absolutely outstanding World War I strategic level game because it is so light, and yet it packs a punch, and there is real strategy here. Now, I got to tell you, too, this is the very first game I have ever played from Compass Games. Compass Games, has this reputation of making these really cool war games. I've always wanted to play one. And I actually, a while back, I through various reasons, my birthday and some from Christmas and whatnot, I actually had a lot of gift certificates to Amazon. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get Attrition of Souls, and I did. I got a few other games from them I haven't played yet, but I decided to buy this game, and I started playing it with Zach, and we played it a few times now, as I say, and we both just fell in love with it. We both just think this is just a fantastic World War I game. Like I say, everything about the game, from its the strategic depth of the game. Each step is just clearly enumerated on a player aid. So it all comes together in this beautiful, fun, exciting package. And it's just, the board's beautiful. Chits are beautiful. Artwork here is great. Presentation is fantastic. The board, the mounted board is just really good. I really, really like the aesthetic of this game. And then gameplay just knocks it over the top for me. Had a tremendous amount of fun with an Attrition of Souls. This is really, whenever I play kind of strategic level games that I don't want to take forever, this is the kind of game I'm thinking of, because I will definitely be coming back to this game again and again and again. It is absolutely outstanding. Recommendation for the Discriminating Gamer for Attrition of Souls is 100% buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We would also ask you, if you do like military history, please check out my other YouTube channel, Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history topics. We talk about books and just various thoughts on military history. I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to that. And I'd also appreciate it if you would give us a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. That helps us out as well. Well, thank you all very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again for joining us. And I got to tell you, my great-grandfather, during World War I, he suffered from a mustard gas attack, and then they pepper sprayed him, and it's safe to say he was a seasoned veteran.
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
It'd be pretty freaking disturbing if you lose Vienna to the Italians.
Well, you're gonna win, Cody.
Oh, Zach, I love you.